We're video recording, and the video will be posted in just a few days to WILPF's YouTube channel and our One WILPF Call webpage. Last month's excellent presentation on caring wages is already there. The link is in the chat and on the text pad. If you don't wish to be seen by the public, you can turn off your camera. But we hope most people will keep their camera on so we get to know one another better. WILPF US is a sisterhood, and our connections to one another keep us strong.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Henney, also of East Bay WILPF in California. WILPF is the oldest women's international peace organization in the world, founded in 1915 by Jane Addams of Hull House. WILPF has over 30 branches in the United States and is one of 50 sections around the world. You can find out more and join us on our website, www.wilpfus.org/join. It's on the text pad. Mary Beth?
Sorry. Please keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking to reduce background noise, and type your questions or comments in the chat. We'll post the agenda in the chat as well. There's also a Google Doc text pad where you can add information under the red line, and Ellen is putting that Google Doc link into the chat right now. Let's begin to know one another by entering your location and name in the chat. And the chat is also where you'll post questions later for our speakers to make them easier to find amid lots of comments and greetings. Please type your questions in caps so we can find them quickly.
For most of this call, you'll probably want to use the gallery view so you can see everyone. But we're suggesting that when our speakers are present, you want to switch to the speaker view so you just see them. We'll remind you again just before the speakers present. We've got a lot of news to share with announcements coming up about our National Triennial Congress, a special early preview of a film you won't want to miss that aligns with our pro-democracy work, and lots more. But first, our featured segment brought to you by our WILPF US National Cuba and Bolivarian Alliance Committee, chaired by Cindy Domingo in Seattle, Washington, and Lenny Villagomez-Reeves in Fresno, California. They've got a lot to share, and they'll introduce a special featured guest speaker as well. As our guest speakers present, please type your questions for them in the chat, as Mary Beth said, in caps, and we'll have a Q&A segment immediately following the speaker. So you might want to go to the speaker view now. Without further ado, here are Cindy and Lenny.
Hello, I'm Cindy Domingo, and Lenny Villagomez is on also, and we are the co-chairs of the co-chairs of WILPF's Cuba and Bolivarian Alliance Issues Committee. And today, as the title slide showed, we want to talk about Cuba, and our presentations are going to talk about a promise to normalize relations with Cuba. Our Issues Committee has been in existence for, I want to say over 15 years. At one point it was one of 3 top priorities for the organization before we went to the Issues Committee's form of organizing. But we're happy to see many of you here today, and also we feel that this issue is very important because during the 2020 presidential election campaign, Joe Biden pledged to return to the Obama administration's foreign policy, of re-engagement with Cuba, including reopening travel by U.S. peoples, allowing U.S. Cuban families, especially, to send money to their loved ones, and reopening the U.S. Embassy in Havana. Those were the policies of the Obama administration, but it only took a few steps to start overturning those policies under the Trump administration, along with over 240 other policies that the Trump administrations implemented to effect regime change in Cuba. However, the Biden administration has not kept its promise and has not changed anything. And in fact, as our presenters will talk about, has stepped up its attacks on Cuba recently by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's attack on Cuba's international medical brigades, who went to over 30 countries in this last year and a half to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, our U.S.-Cuba Solidarity Movement has joined with Canada to form a North America Solidarity Movement in support of Cuba and to end the blockade. It has expanded and united in unprecedented ways in North America to effect change. As you'll see from the presentations, the Cuban American community is angry at the fact that the Biden administration has not changed anything. And in fact, monthly caravans were initiated by Miami's Cuban American communities, and 6 Cuban Americans are on a 1,300-mile walk from Miami to Washington, D.C. now to tell the Biden administration that the Cuban American community want to change in U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba. In another development that Lenny will talk about, over $450,000 has been raised by our solidarity organizations here in the United States to buy syringes for Cuba, to vaccinate Cuba's whole population by the end of the year, so that Cuba's tourism can reopen its doors, so that Cuba can have the hard currency it needs. We will have these 2 presentations, and then after our first speaker, we'll open it up for a few questions, and then Lenny will give another presentation. And we want to end this presentation with concrete ways that you can help change U.S. foreign policy around Cuba. And also so that you will be able to go back to your branches to see how you can affect change. And we'll have question and answers and discussion after Lenny speaks as well. Our first speaker, we're honored to have here, and it's my first time to meet also, Elena Ferrer. She's a Cuban American who is president of the Foundation for Normalization of U.S.-Cuba Relations. She's joining us from Miami, and she also works with ACERE, a new organization that's working in Washington, D.C. to effect change with Congress. ACERE stands for the Alliance for Cuba Engagement and Respect. Elena?
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure, and it's really great to meet you again. I was at another conference that you actually were one of the speakers. I want to start by saying that the Cuban American community is really disappointed in what has happened, and we have mobilized. You mentioned the walk that is taking place, and that is Professor Carlos Lasso, who heads an organization called Bridges of Love, Puentes de Amor. And he is very much a part of the caravans that have been taking place every single month. There have been 12 of them by now. It started out with just a few bicycles and 3 and 4 cars in Miami, and it's now hundreds of cars. We have become actually so effective that we're getting some pushback, and some of it is not good. We had some people trying to actually attack part of the participants, etc. I'm kind of used to that. I've been around this since the Pope John Paul's visit to Cuba. So, you know, we're kind of used to it in Miami. Things have changed though. Things have changed throughout the time that I have been involved in Cuba activism, which is way over 20 years, actually. It's about 24 now. When I first started, there were only a very small group of us, and it was very dangerous. It's not a small group anymore. We have a lot of support for each other. But let me speak about the caravans, because the caravans have become the forefront of the activism against the embargo, which I call the blockade. Some people call it the embargo, but it's a blockade. We are disappointed, but we think that if we keep pushing, we are going to get some action from this administration. In the last few weeks, there's a lot of talk swirling around Washington, D.C., that they're about to announce restaffing the embassy. They're about to announce the remittances, which are so important. And that includes the license for Western Union again, because there's no sense in opening up the remittances if you can't send them. You can't send them, and opening up the rest of the airports, which to Cuban Americans is so vital, because if you have family in Santiago de Cuba right now, to get from Havana, which is the only airport that is open right now, to Santiago is outrageously expensive and almost impossible. And so a lot of people haven't seen their families for quite a while, not just because of the pandemic, but because of these measures. And as you mentioned, Cindy, there were over 240 of them. And the last one was the kicker, when they put Cuba back in the countries that sponsor terrorism just a few days before the end of the administration, just a few days before Biden take over. And to me, it's outrageous that they haven't moved to take Cuba off that list. So we have been doing caravan at the end of the month, every single month. I'm also with an organization of my own where I do a YouTube presentation called Here with Elena, Aquí with Elena, every single week at the end of the week. And we have covered each and every one of them. And there will be, when Carlos Lasso arrives in Washington, D.C., and anyone that can possibly go ahead and be at Lafayette Park on the 25th of July at 2:00 in the afternoon, there's going to be a huge rally where we're going to welcome Carlos at the end of his walk. And we're going to be there across the White House demanding that they fulfill the campaign promises that they made. The Cuban people are suffering. They're suffering. And to have this going on during a pandemic is cruel. It's against everything that the United States is supposed to stand for. And it doesn't help. It doesn't even help the policies that the United States claims that they are so in favor of. Before Trump, there were so many small businesses that had sprung up all over Havana. There was so much hope with the people. I was there shortly after the Obama, shortly after Obama was there, I was there. And people were so excited about the future and about hope, and so wanting to have this contact with United States citizens. The cruise ships had started to dock, and the older section of Havana was filled with Americans that were interacting with Cuban people. It was actually an amazing time. And what we were hoping is that we would go on from there with the Biden administration, that he would immediately reverse the cruel policies that Trump had enacted and then would go forward from that. So we're pushing for that. We're going to continue to push. We're not going to forget about what he said he was going to do. And we want your support. We want your support. And if anyone is around Washington, D.C. on July the 25th, join us in Lafayette Park, and let's really let this administration know that that idea that they have the Cuban votes in Miami because they're not doing this, because they're keeping this policy, that's a myth. We are a lot more. There's a lot more Cuban Americans that are engaged with Cuba and want this to end than there are Cuban Americans who do not. And I think I'm going to stop because I would really love to get some questions.
Okay, thank you, Elena. If we have time right now to take a couple of questions for Elena, and then we can move on to Lenny. Any questions? Oh, okay. I see one here. Teresa. Hi,
Hello.
Teresa. Good to see you.
Sorry, I missed the last meeting of the committee, but I have a friend, Afro-Cuban, who describes himself as staying just under the radar of the Gusanos in Florida. And I'm wondering if Elena knows Alberto in Jones. He was a veterinarian, and he was
I have been a friend of Alberto for over 20 years. I love Alberto. I love Alberto.
But he's getting quite elderly. You know, he's over 80 now.
I know.
When was the last time you spoke with him? Because he was doing quite
I went to Tampa when they had the first caravan a couple of months ago. We covered it for my YouTube, and he was there. He drove to Tampa, and he was looking quite well. I know that he's elderly, and I mean, I don't even like to use that word. I know he's 80, but he was his old self. He was his old self. He was part of the caravan, and I was so happy to see him.
Well, he's our honorary board member on the board of the Southern Anti-Racism Network. At our 20th anniversary, he drove up to Atlanta for the board meeting. And when I asked all the board members to come up front, then Alberto came up front. I said, Alberto, would you honor us with being on the board? And he went, absolutely. So he is on the board of the Southern Anti-Racism Network. I've known him. We met at a reparations conference some time ago. I think it was in 2001. And so we've kept in touch over the years. And anytime I call Alberto saying, I need you to come speak, I need you to come offer something, he always shows up. He is an amazing man. Thank you so much.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to Lenny? Cindy, do you? We can't hear you, Cindy.
Says, are other countries able to fly into the provincial airports? Is it just the US that is not able to fly into the provincial airports?
It's just the US. It's just the US. Some other countries were not able to while the airports were closed because of the pandemic, but they have started to reopen again. I know Matanzas is open. And so, yes, Copa from Panama, I believe, is not only flying to Havana, but to other airports as well.
Okay. All right. So I think we'll go ahead with Lenny's presentation. And Lenny is the other co-chair. And I'm so happy that Lenny is here being the co-chair because I call her our expert on Cuba because every day she reads about Cuba on the news and the news in Cuba. So take it away, Lenny.
Well, it is true. I do read Granma every day. I look at Cuba Debate. I've got friends in Cuba. I am WhatsApping with on a daily basis, but the only real experts on Cuba are in Cuba. So let's start with the good news. I'm really going to do my very best to share a screen. This is not something I've practiced a lot, but it looks like it's working. Is it working?
Okay.
All right, Cuba's medical solidarity. Let's start with the good news. The Cuban vaccine, Abdallah, it's not just a vaccine, it's a vacunazo. It works at over 92% efficacy with the 3 doses over 4 weeks, and it's approved for use. Yeah. And the president of Cuba is affirming the decision of the Cuban people to continue their medical solidarity, already really strongly expressed in medical brigades and in the Latin American School of Medicine, by extending access to the Cuban vaccines to countries that can't afford the vaccines developed by the world's great powers. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel said, "Your hearts, the hearts of the scientists, are worth millions. And we have to consider this will be good for the more than 11 million Cubans and also for millions of people in the world, above all those who are poorest and who have no access to any of the other vaccines." The woman is in the center, is the lead research scientist at the Cuban Institute that developed the Abdallah vaccine, which has been just approved. The hearts of the scientists. This is Dr. Mebe de la Caridad Rodriguez from the other big biotech institute, the Finley Vaccine Institute. Cuba is the only small country. It's the only third world country. It's the only Latin American country to develop any vaccine. They've had 2 vaccines that have been approved for use after extensive testing. And there's another 3 vaccines, including one for nasal administration, which are still in the trials process. Cuba can do this because Cuba has a robust, innovative, advanced biotech sector, despite 6 decades of US blockade. Cuba's biotech sector is unique, with national health system as its first priority, an orientation toward global South-South cooperation. It's entirely owned and financed by the Cuban people, not by speculative capital, and developed by planning and market forces, responds to the needs of the people and not to profit motives. And it's based on cooperation and collaboration, not competition. Sorry, I said that. This model has worked. Cuba has developed some really innovative medications and vaccines, including the world's first meningococcus vaccine, a treatment for a kind of lung cancer, a medication to treat diabetic foot ulcers that dramatically reduces the need for amputation, and meds that have been used to treat COVID-19 with good results. People go to Cuba and they say, why are there no tropical diseases? It turns out there are no tropical diseases. There are only diseases of poverty. The free, universally accessible healthcare system, community-based, has transformed the country. But the biotech scientists have certainly made their contribution, and this is going to be really essential now, as a mass vaccination campaign has already begun. Cubans may say not a minute too soon, because although Cuba had very few COVID infections during most of 2020, after the borders were reopened in November, the real numbers began to climb. Elsewhere in the world, high-income countries have cornered the supply of vaccines despite the UN's COVAX effort. We funneled, billions of public dollars to private pharmaceutical companies, and we've got the vaccine. The pharmaceutical companies have the profits. What Pfizer paid to its shareholders last quarter would vaccinate all of Africa. All of Africa. Worldwide, we see virus variants impairing vaccine efficacy. So it's essential everyone vaccinated at the earliest point in time. This brings us to another point about Cuba's vaccine effort. Cuba's had a commercial, economic, and financial blockade imposed by the US for more than 60 years. So certainly the fact that the US can control what Cuba receives in trade from other countries has influenced the Cuban decision to make a vaccine and not depend on international efforts. But Cuba's medical solidarity didn't just begin during the pandemic. For decades, Cuba has been sending thousands of medical professionals overseas to work in countries that needed doctors for a variety of reasons. Post-colonial countries, countries suffering after natural disasters. Most recently, in 2005, the Henry Reeve Brigade was created, and they were ready in that year to help victims of Hurricane Katrina. Bush turned them down, of course. They've also been very key in the struggle against serious epidemics such as Ebola in West Africa and cholera in Haiti. A lot of admiration was expressed, even in the US media, for the Cuban effort in West Africa. They were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. In these 15 years, over 13,000 Cuban health workers have cared for over 4 million patients in 53 countries. During the present pandemic, the Henry Reeves contingent has so far sent 53 brigades to 39 countries and territories at the request of their governments. They've also been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize this year. WILPF US supported that nomination. Everybody loves the Cuban doctors. And indeed, it's really hard to think of a negative aspect to a country sending doctors internationally who work in countries with insufficient health care or go to areas where private medicine, accustomed to urban settings and patients with money, will not go. It takes a really special kind of malicious inventiveness to find a way to attack this initiative. And it takes a special kind of cruelty too. This is South Africa, by the way, to try to force host countries to send their Cuban medical workers home in the midst of a global pandemic. And the US government has that kind of malice too. They're not content with putting Cuba on the human trafficking list. The US has been threatening countries that invite Cuban doctors, nurses, with also being put on the list, accused of human trafficking for trying to get care for their people in the midst of a pandemic that's overwhelmed their own health systems. And the consequences of this are severe, related to US aid, trade, access to loans from the IMF and other loans. It takes a special cynicism to politicize the struggle to eliminate human trafficking in this way. And it's more than a little bit disgusting. It says, why are you sending troops to Minneapolis? And Trump says, what do you want us to send? Doctors? We're not Cuba. So what about the accusation that Cuban health workers are not volunteers? John Kirk, a professor of Latin American studies at Dalhousie University, which I don't know how to pronounce, interviewed hundreds of Cuban medical personnel and found the same things I've found in talking to people, far smaller numbers of people who have been on internationalist missions. Because prior to COVID-19, I spent about 2.5 months every year in Cuba. People do this because it's an economic opportunity, but also it's an adventure. It's a chance to contribute. People naturally have idealism and a desire to help. And Cuban education encourages this spirit, but no one is coerced. Actually, there are waiting lists, and a place in an international brigade is an honor, as well as a chance to make some extra money. You can read Dalhousie's report in The Nation. I'll post all those links later. So this takes us to ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine. In '98, when Hurricanes Mitch and George devastated Central America and the Caribbean, Cuba immediately sent 2,000 medical personnel to help out in the affected countries. But Cuba contributed a lot more than just short-term relief. They pointed out that the permanent hurricane of poverty and underdevelopment kills more people every year than these hurricanes. And they presented a comprehensive plan to create long-term healthcare solutions by training doctors from these countries who would return and care for poor people. People, especially children, okay, die from a lot of preventable and treatable causes: diarrhea and dehydration, infectious disease. And as Fidel said, it really wouldn't be so difficult to save these babies' lives. All that would be required, is the medicines and the medical personnel and the political will to want to help. So Cuba offered 500 full medical school scholarships a year to students from the countries affected by the hurricanes. The only condition attached was that the students had to make a commitment to return to their home countries where they would provide medical service to the communities where they were most needed, the poorest, the hardest hit, the most remote communities of their home countries, like a reverse brain drain. And this is why it's called the Latin American School of Medicine. But other countries heard about the program and inquired about sending their own students. It quickly grew to include students from 30 nations of Africa and the Americas, and now includes students from 124 countries. But how did the US get in there? The man on the left is from Palestine, the man on the right is from South Africa. This is a class on environmental medicine. So how is it there are US students studying medicine in Cuba? In the year 2000, a Congressional Black Caucus delegation was visiting Cuba. Representative Benny Thompson from Mississippi commended Cuba for all that they've done for the healthcare of the world, and he said, hey, in my district, we have third world conditions also. And Cuba offered to extend full scholarships to the Latin American School of Medicine to US students, most of them people of color. Go back to that last slide. Here's a graduating class from the US. Most of them people of color who come from poor backgrounds and would have no chance of becoming doctors in the US medical educational system. To date, there are 208 ELAM graduates. I know, I had to put a hero shot in there. There's me and Benny Thompson and a couple of ELAM grads and a from Chile. So do you know a young person? Do you know a young person who wants to become a doctor in order to serve their community, but doesn't have the money for a US medical education? It's possible to go on full scholarship to ELAM if you meet the requirements, and I will put the info in the chat later. ELAM, it's amazing. It's the biggest medical school in the world. So that takes us to, in Cuba, there are problems and there are shortages. And most of the shortages are the effect of the US blockade, which prohibits trade with Cuba, with the penalty of seizure of a company's US assets. Any company with a US affiliate can be prevented from trading with Cuba. And this includes pharmaceutical companies. Any medical device with any component made by a company with a US affiliate can be prohibited from being sold to Cuba. Blockade prevents medicines, including antibiotics, pain meds, chemo drugs, pacemakers, heart valves, surgical tools, MRI machines, and even medical books. I cannot mail a medical book to Cuba, even prior to the pandemic. The blockade nominally excludes medication and medical devices, but only under a system of licensing that's really complex, laborious, time-consuming, and that is often denied. I will tell you that I do not feel happy being responsible for a policy this cruel and this immoral. This is my compadre Carlos, developing x-rays by hand. Talk about shortages. When did people last do this in the US? Like 1950? So the first goal is to end the US blockade of Cuba, obviously. Meanwhile, let's donate to the syringe campaign. Cuba has 11.3 million people, but plans to produce 100 million doses of vaccine to meet its commitment to sharing its low-cost vaccines with poor countries in the developing world. But Cuba needs to get fully vaccinated first, and there's a shortage of syringes in Cuba, and the shortage is due to the blockade. Now, at this time, when the syringes used for vaccination are in high demand and short supply everywhere, suppliers don't want to deal with the US government threats, hassles, fines, and sanctions involved with trading with Cuba. Cuba's short about 20 million of the 30 million syringes it needs. Our goal is to raise $150,000 to purchase and send 5 million syringes to Cuba, and we're close. This campaign is sponsored by the Saving Lives Campaign and by the National Network on Cuba, which US is a member of, together with Global Health Partners, which does have a license for this campaign. By getting syringes to Cuba, we can show gratitude to Cuba for the help and solidarity they've given so many people in so many places worldwide. We can help Cuba, and by helping Cuba, we can help everybody in the world, not every single body, but people all over the world to be healthier and safer. And donations to the appeal can be made at Global Health Partners. We'll put it all in the chat. The link, the address for you people like me who like to go ahead and use checkbooks. Federation of Cuban Women is the Cuban equivalent of WILPF. This is an FMC meeting. And you know, life goes on. Even in the middle of a pandemic, these kids are my ahijados. They're my godchildren. I have another one, but I don't like him as well as I like those two. And that's the baby. So come on, how could you, how could you even think of trying to hurt these people? That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Lenny.
Are we going to have questions right now, or?
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes to have some questions and discussions. Elena, your hand is up. Did you want to say something?
I did want to add one thing.
Okay.
Not only, I think we need to understand that the United States would also gain a lot by having closer ties to the scientific community in Cuba, because there are medications in Cuba that could save a lot of people in the United States. To begin with, almost no one loses a limb in Cuba because they have an ointment that they use on diabetics that have sores that is amazing. And the US does not have access to it. So it's a two-way street. We would gain a lot also. Lung cancer, meningitis. I mean, the list goes on and on. We would gain a lot also. It's not a one-way street. And as far as the syringe campaign, I wanted to let you know that we collect money to send at every caravan, and we'll be doing it again in Lafayette Park.
Good.
Thank you.
So Darian and then Nancy.
This is Darian. I couldn't help but notice that many of the scientists people were women, which seems to me to be somewhat different from what we see in the United States. I wonder if you could talk about those kinds of opportunities in Cuba.
Lenny, you want to do that?
I do not know the exact figure, but I know that over 60% of medical professionals, of scientists in Cuba are women. I could find you the exact percentages, but I don't have them in front of me, and I'm a little hyper right now between presenting and the earthquake.
Would you say that the percentages are substantially different from the US?
Hella totally different. That's why I was showing you those pictures of Cuban women scientists who are the heads of the institutes and the heads of research at the institutes that are making these vaccines. Would you see that in the US? Me, I don't think so.
Thank you.
It's a different system. It really is. And it has a lot more opportunities for women, both in science and in, I mean, over 50% of the Cuban parliament is women.
Nancy.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful presentation and discussion. I just wanted to follow up, I guess, with Darian's question. Could you just briefly say something about how women are treated in the health system in Cuba?
Well, given that more than 50% of doctors are women, they're treated as sisters mostly. I don't know.
Yeah.
In some ways, Cuban medicine could be a little bit considered maternalist rather than paternalist.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
By
Good.
the way, you probably already know this. Everybody probably already knows this, but they have far better infant mortality statistics in Cuba than we do here in the US. Even if you look only at white infants in the US, if you start looking at Black infants in the US, and believe me, you look at Cuba and the race is defined very differently in Cuba than how we define it here. But to US eyes, a huge percentage of the people in Cuba are what we call Black. And so you can't say that those statistics in Cuba, those wonderful child mortality statistics, are because they're dealing with a different population. If anything, it's a Blacker population by far than, I mean, yeah, Cuba is Black to an extent you would never imagine by looking at Miami.
Thank you very much.
I know Jan Stroud and Cindy Roberts are both on the Cuba Issues Committee, and I don't know if you want to speak to that particular issue. Jan, are you still there? Oh, maybe she didn't.
Yes, hi.
Hi. You want to speak to that?
I would add just two things. Hi, what a wonderful program. And I want to also honor Elena's really powerful presentation, but her lifelong commitment. I think I've met you decades ago and you are still my hero. Thank you. I think it made a huge difference when so many of the professionals left at the triumph of the revolution, and it opened doors for women, and particularly women of Afro-Cuban descent, to enter many so-called non-traditional professions that we would still classify in our own country. I think it also normalized the idea that you would have a doctor who would be a woman. And in fact, one of the areas that I think we found in some of our delegations was the fact that they had an affirmative action program to recruit more men into these roles. And also offered bonuses for everyone that would be able to continue given the competition of tourism and the amount of money you can make from tips. So I think it's a very fascinating and important story to be told. And I think the fact that a nonprofit healthcare as a human right model and value has attracted also a much more diverse population to the profession as well. So I'm sure Cindy can add some more, but that's been my experience. And thank you.
Okay.
Andy had a really great question in the chat.
Mhm.
Let's see where it is.
I could ask it.
Yeah, there you go.
I just wondered, quite a few people on this call know the contributions of Cuban doctors and nurses and the work that's being done on vaccinations. But when I talk to even progressives, a lot of them don't know that they've developed vaccinations, and certainly most Americans have no idea of those kinds of very important, I think, sympathetic kinds of issues that I think Americans would be sympathetic to those issues if if the word could get out. But obviously there's a lot of reasons it's being blocked. But have you found ways to get the word out about what is actually happening in Cuba rather than the propaganda that goes out?
I mean, I think it's been difficult because part of the blockade is an information blockade. And a lot of the traditional media does not cover it. I mean, obviously, Democracy Now! Has good coverage every once in a while. And so we really have to use our alternative media. There are on YouTube, there's a series of 3 videos called Belly of the Beast and on Cuba that are excellent, shorter pieces that can be used to educate people. That's why I think and we have been trying to pass resolutions in various cities for medical cooperation and for people to learn about the what Cuba has done for developing countries in terms of healthcare as a human right. So, you know, that's why our movements are so important to get the information out because of the information blockade and to open up travel, because once people can go to Cuba, as somebody has put in here, go to Cuba, Joy says, see for yourselves, make up your mind, and don't listen to the propaganda that the United States spends so much money on. I think Teresa,
Yes.
Teresa, you have one more point. We just have 1 more minute.
Well, I just want to thank Lenny for alerting me to the syringe campaign. I did make a donation a couple of months ago, and I'd like to know how things are going with the syringe campaign. And also, Alberto had told me it's not good to travel to Cuba now.
Already introduced hundreds of.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to go to Cuba. Well, also travel is closed. We don't want to expose Cubans to the virus, especially if people are able to travel there. We have raised over $450,000 for the syringe campaign. People were initially saying, well, maybe we'll peg it at 75,000. Then we raised to 150,000. Then we kept raising it and raising. So now we want to go through the end of July and try to raise $500,000. We're just very short of it. We've raised over $450,000. And so we're really trying to make the big push. You can go to www.dhpartners.org and make your contribution either by check or Visa card or whatever. So I think we really need to close now. We want to kind of keep to our time. Mary Beth was gracious to give us, 45 minutes to make the presentation. And thank you so much, Elena, for coming on. It's it's an honor to have a Cuban American here who has dedicated most of her life to this issue. And then Lenny, who is very knowledgeable as a former doctor, retired doctor, to know about the medical.
I've still got a medical license.
There you go.
It was my
all.
pleasure to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Really.
And we hope
Thank you
Well,
so much, Elena. It was wonderful having you. Thank you so very much.
No,
Yeah.
thank you for asking me.
Thank you. And we hope you'll join us for our panel at the Congress, where we're going to talk about more of a women's focus. Why the blockade has stopped us from learning about the advances of the women's agenda there in Cuba and what we have lost because of that.
Great, thank you.
Great. Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
is. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Elena. It was really a very, very important issue. And I appreciate the alliances you maintain on behalf of WILP US. And we hope a lot of our members now on this call, and when they go back to their branches, will advocate for to end the embargo and normalize relations with Cuba. So let's keep pushing. That's all I can say. So moving on, our first announcement comes from the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee, formerly our Corporations versus Democracy Committee, and it celebrates the groundbreaking work of WILPF to challenge corporate personhood and assert people over profits. Mary Beth chairs that committee. What's up, Mary Beth?
Okay, well, we have an event in that's being planned that we're excited about. This is the 70th anniversary year of the Powell Memorandum, or the Powell Manifesto. If you don't know about it, you should Google it. It was a roadmap drawn up in 1971, which was the roadmap for corporate America to really clamp down on progressive movements and activists and democracy. We're living with the repercussions of it. And around that same issue, much of the earliest work that WILPF did on challenging corporate power is aligned with many of our allies that are working on this issue. Back in the day, in the early 2000s, you'll remember all the great materials that WILPF produced. The corporate challenge corporate power, assert the people's rights course, the timeline of corporate constitutional rights, and the many great plays that Jim Allison wrote. Around 2000, the same time that we were working so hard on these things, a film came out called The Corporation. And our own Mary Zeppernick was interviewed in that film. It was produced and directed by Joel Bakken. Well, he's kind of disgusted that things have only gotten worse. And he just produced and directed a new documentary called The New Corporation, The Unfortunately Necessary Sequel. And WILPF has been able to procure a premiere pre-screening of this film, which is very exciting. It's not out yet among the public. And starting July 18th at 7 p.m., WILPF US will be hosting a screening of The New Corporation, The Unfortunately Necessary Sequel. And the documentary will be available to watch during the 72 hours from July 18th at 7 p.m. through Wednesday, July 21st at 7 p.m. We invite all of you to join that film viewing. And there'll be a way after that to meet with Joel Bakken himself, the executive producer, and the co-producer, Jennifer Abbott. And they'll be talking about why they reissued this documentary and what's happened since the original one, and the impact that the films have had. And immediately following that Zoom with Joel and Jennifer, we'll go to a panel discussion featuring the WILPF All-Stars from
Frozen.
We seem to have lost Mary Beth.
Yeah, I think she froze. I'm gonna, while she gets back on, I'm gonna take a moment to reflect. Oh, there she is. If Molly Morgan will be able to join us. I'm sorry, was I not? Yeah, you froze for a minute. Okay. Really a few seconds. Okay. Let's see. After the film, on Wednesday, the 21st, Joel Bakken will be talking about the production of the film. And immediately after that, we'll have a panel discussion with the corporate power authors, including Virginia Rasmussen, Jan Edwards, possibly Molly Morgan, and Jim and Tommy Alliston. If you if you remember that course, which is still relevant and still really important,
you'll remember the incredible work that these folks did. And it'll be so good to see them again and hear what they think about what's happened since they completed that work. I also wanted to note that on Friday, August 27th, we'll be kicking off our series of webinar trainings for public banking activists. That's co-sponsored with an economy of our own, and it'll really offer some great training. Because we're not going to have a One WILPF call in in August because of our Congress. I wanted to make sure that you had that date, August 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you'll be getting more information about it. And just for the last few minutes, in our June call, Women, Money, and Democracy presented information about caring wages. And I just wondered if we could take a quick poll of folks. Have you had a chance to think more about that? Have you talked to your branches about what you might be able to do to follow the activists' actions that were recommended? If you can put that information in the chat, or if you want to raise your hands, we can call on a few people, for maybe 2 people, to hear what you have to say. Yes, Sandy, is that you? Did you have something? No. Let's see. I'm trying to see the gallery view. Does anyone have anything they want to say about this?
Nancy,
I would
has
just
her
say-
hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
Whose hand is up?
Yeah, well, San Francisco, not part of our WILPF group, but San Francisco has a strong presence of a couple organizations, more than one, that are, doing this area of wages for caregivers. And also they have a program, it may go beyond San Francisco, it might be statewide now, I'm not sure, Hand in Hand, which is people who employ caregivers with the caregivers and kind of instructing them on proper pay to the workers and what they should be expected to do or not do. So it's already very strong here in San Francisco.
Great. Well, if anyone's wanting more information about it or would like to connect with our committee about it, please contact me at mbgardam@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat, in the text pad too. And there are those sample letters that Lenny was talking about on the text pad. They are there. So if you can access that text pad, you can get to see those sample letters. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I wanted to add too that I really found that the presenters were very inspiring. And so if you did miss the call, you might want to watch the recording of it that's posted on the WILPF website because it's worthwhile. And now we're going to talk about WILPF's National Triennial Congress, which is just around the corner. This year it's a virtual event, as you know, and we're inviting our members and the public to attend. So now is the time to register. Our Congress committee has all the details for WILPF members and the public. So you could, while our representative for the Congress, I'm not sure who that is, will be presenting, you can type questions into the chat and type them in caps.
I don't see Mary Hanson Harrison on the call, and I don't see Beverly Fitzpatrick on there either. Darian, did you want to announce anything, or is there another member of the Congress committee here who wants to talk about the Congress?
This is Darian. I think Nancy might be better informed than I, but I can definitely say that the Congress Committee is working out the fine tuning on the schedule for the weekdays and the second weekend. It's quite an undertaking to balance all the numbers of presentations of different lengths and to try to have them in some coherent sequence and fit them into the time available. I want to just alert people that we have an action-packed Congress starting on Friday, the 13th of August and continuing through Sunday, the 22nd. On the weekdays, Monday through Thursday, it will just be for a couple of hours or so in the evenings. Weekends will be a longer session. Now is a good time to make sure your laundry is done, your floors are clean, so that you can really steep yourself in a fantastic Congress experience. Wonderful, educational, informative, inspiring presentations, including Vandana Shiva and Baud Marlowe, Paul Cavell, who wrote Uprooting Racism. Lots of good stuff. So an e-alert went out with the Congress information that's now available on the WILPF US website. If you go to, and there's the old logo, and it has the e-alert you can find if you look at the bottom of the WILPF US homepage under resources for the archive of e-alerts. It came out, I believe it was either earlier this week or last week. Thank you. And if there are particular questions, I may be able to answer them. I will just say that we're anticipating that there will be the opportunity to submit resolutions. Information about that will come out probably in August, but you can start getting your resolutions busy. Thank you.
Cheryl had a question about when the times of the schedule will be given.
That's what the Congress Committee is working on right now. I expect those to be ready within the next 2 to 4 days.
Okay, and the website, the web page for the Congress does have a place for you to register. It's not too early to register, and you might even consider making a donation in addition to the very modest cost of $30 for 2 weeks packed with webinars and panels and keynotes and plenaries. If you do donate a little more, it can offset the cost of others who can't afford to come, and it can also help us cover our technical costs for the Congress.
Great. Well, as you can hear, the Congress is going to have a lot of amazing speakers and panels and workshops, and so now's the time to register so you can participate in all kinds of webinars and panel discussions.
Sandy?
Yes.
I just want to add one more very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Congress Committee has deliberately made the lowest ever Congress registration cost of $30. And that is specifically so that WILPF members can invite their political friends and allies and say, it's $30 for 10 days or more. Right. Please register. So encourage your friends to learn about the Congress. When the schedule gets out, that will be a great time to show it to them and watch their eyes go wide. Thank you.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be on Zoom because it's going to be able to draw, I mean, a lot of people who wouldn't have been able to come to a live Congress will be able to participate in all kinds of ways. So it's exciting in that way that we can do that. And also, as Darian said, it's not expensive. And so you can encourage your friends and non-WILPF members to look at the schedule and see what they might be interested in. I just wanted to take a minute to make a quick pitch. This is for one panel that I think before enlisting, which is a counter recruitment group, did a one WILPF call, if some of you were on possibly, and we're doing a panel during the week. It's not clear exactly when yet, but you can look it up. And we basically want to do this as a follow-up to really, if any members are interested in maybe doing some counter recruitment work in the schools, that we're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of how to do that and walk you through our website and show you what resources there are and try to get people as involved as possible. So we're hoping that some of you will join us for that workshop. So now we have a Congress-related announcement from Nancy Price, co-chair with Randy Solik of the National Earth Democracy Committee of WILPF US. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad that Darian mentioned resolutions because Earth Democracy will be submitting one for discussion and approval, whatever process that becomes, in relation to the United Nations Committee of Parties 26th meeting in Glasgow, late October, early November. As you may remember, Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015. Biden has taken us back into that agreement. But one of the really outstanding issues is that the military was able to negotiate their carbon footprint out of being included in that agreement. So this year, there's going to be a huge push to get the carbon footprint of the military back in, to have that footprint recognized as contributing in so many different ways to the climate emergency that we're experiencing. So look for that. And let's be very clear that Biden's approach is a very moderate one as he seeks agreement with the Republicans and is sort of running down the middle because he still has not really come out strongly for green and blue, that is water, New Deal and the funding necessary. That's why Move the Money campaign is so important. And if you go to Common Dreams today, they have an article of what's called a fire tornado that took place on June 29th in Northern California, which is where the heat rising of the forest fire up there creates an actual tornado of flames, smoke, and debris that is lofted in a swirl of a tornado-like activity up into the atmosphere. It's absolutely terrifying when you look at it on the video that's on the Common Dreams website today. And that's what we can expect more and more. So let's get this resolution. Earth Democracy will get this resolution done, and then let's get it passed, and then we'll publicize it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Nancy. It's also encouraging, you didn't mention this, but it's encouraging that the International Working Group, Environmental Working Group, is organizing to have a presence at COP26 in Glasgow. So thank you for your work to represent WILPF US at those international planning calls. I know most of them are really early in the morning. So, all right, so next we have a short announcement from Cheryl Spencer representing the Disarm Committee. It's an important activist opportunity coming up in August. Cheryl, tell us all about it.
Yes, thank you. With a deal of difficulty, we have managed to get the Google Doc open to everybody and editable by everybody. I kept going back and finding those settings and changing them. Once Mary Beth had given me permission, I was able to pass my permission on. But Nancy, when you say the military carbon footprint was not included in the calculations, is that just the US military, or did no military, any country, get included in their calculations?
No military.
In anywhere?
Yes,
Right.
but of course, the US military's carbon footprint is the most enormous because we have 800 overseas bases. There are huge supply lines for all the materials used, from raw materials to manufactured materials, to supply the military with these long supply chains of either airplane or freighter. And I could go on and on about that. So this really pertains to the US military in particular.
Okay, thank you. So
thank
now
you for asking.
Yeah, let me give you a bit of my announcement. So the weekend before our Congress starts, of course, is the unfortunate 76th anniversary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, from Friday the 6th through Monday the 9th. And because we've all been concentrating on Congress and phone campaigns, we haven't had the big push that we did last year when 28 branches did things for the 75th anniversary. So I have collected together in a Word document, which I've now placed in the Google Doc, about 9 different events that are going on around the country, some of them in person, like at the Kings Bay submarine base, like outside Lawrence Livermore Lab, like in Seattle, where if you live close to those places, you can go to these events, and the information is given in that my section in the Google Doc. But also there is an action I've put in there that all WILFers can do wherever you are, which is being led out of Japan. They want us to make paper cranes and take a photograph of ourselves with it and then post it on social media like Twitter or Instagram. Now, if you have the paper cranes we all received last year, I've certainly kept mine, the ones I strung down. They're all waiting to be posted outside my house again. You could cheat a bit and just take photographs of yourself with those peace cranes. So any WILFer anywhere can do this. There are videos of how to make a paper crane, peace crane if you haven't. And so the Japanese organization is trying to bring world attention. And in the e-news, the July e-news, at the end of my article is about, I've reiterated some of the resource materials that we sent out last year on how to make a peace fast, how to take part in bell ringing. So some of the activities that one could do any year. So please go read my email of July in the e-news. Go scroll all the way down to the bottom and you will see links to last year's resource guides and materials that are still active. So please, do pay attention to this unfortunate 76th anniversary. The Trinity test also has its 76th anniversary. That was the bomb that went off in New Mexico, was the first detonation, and it spread radioactive material over an unknowing population. So let's take a few minutes out of our preparations for the Congress and pay attention to this commemoration of these unfortunate events that happened in the past, that are essentially, when you see what happened to the people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that is why we're working so hard to abolish nuclear weapons, so another one is never set off in anger or accidentally or tested. So it's in the Google Doc, and I'm hoping you can all now go and at least see the Google Doc. I've put the link several times in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for all you do. Our section president, Darian DeLu, has a series of announcements now. Darian, welcome.
Thank you. There's always a challenge of making one's way to the unmute button. So I have taken the time to go ahead and post my announcements into the Google document, but I realize not everyone can see that. And I always like to elaborate a little bit on my announcements. So I will stream through these as quickly as possible. I really enjoyed thinking about this quotation from Martine Prechtel, who works with Indigenous people and is sort of a philosopher. He says, "I have to scare you a little bit because the comfort you live in is too scary for me. And I think if we look around us, we might realize that a lot of our comfort is a little too scary. We're living in a world where people have a tendency to focus more on their current comfort than on the very grim realities of the futures we are facing. So the time is now for WILPFers to be active, and I'm sure everyone is aware of that. Our deadlines are running out. You've heard from Nancy, from Cheryl, from Mary Beth, and from others about all the different ways that help is needed in the political sphere. So I urge you to go ahead and get active with WILPF, and that's what a number of my announcements are about. First, I want to mention that WILPF US is working in multiple ways and developing multiple ideas for how to confront racism in the US. WILPF US has been active in these ways for decades with greater or lesser success at different times. At this time, we are preparing more ideas and want to encourage branches and at-large members to make sure to educate yourselves. Many of our branches are already doing so with reading groups and study groups, and many of our members are involved in those already. But if somehow you haven't had that opportunity, we encourage you to get started now. Branches can go ahead and at each of their meetings, allow time to discuss some articles, some videos, other resources that you've all taken the time to review, and begin to really educate yourselves further so that you're ready for the next steps that we'll be rolling out in the next few months. Additionally, we have a new study guide that will be coming out very soon. It's not so much a study guide as a list of lots and lots of resources on anti-racism, on dismantling white supremacy. And those resources are 23 pages worth, organized by topic. So that's something to look forward to. Also, I'm really appealing to people to get techie. Prepare now for our Congress. If you're having any problems with Zoom, you'll want to sign up for our basic Zoom training on Thursday, July 15th. This training is not to show you how to set up a Zoom account. It's not to show you how to run a meeting. It's to show you how to really enjoy the meetings by having Zoom work for you. So it's a really straightforward and simple way to feel more at ease with Zoom so that you can enjoy the Congress instead of panicking when something goes wrong with your Zoom. We won't be able to take care of everything. I have found that some people have very creative computers that give them more trouble than ever, but we will try to prepare you for the most familiar difficulties. So I've put the registration link, the pre-registration link in the text pad. It's also in the e-news that came out in July with the title.
I put it in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of tech, I am continuing to look for anyone who's willing to volunteer to be tech help at the Congress. This is obviously for people who are fairly comfortable with Zoom, but you don't need to be a master. We're going to have, again, a 1-hour training, very different from the basic training, but we'll teach people the skills they need to provide the kinds of help we expect the presenters and sometimes the participants in presentations will need. We'll also have more advanced tech people available, and we hope to roll out some very user-friendly tech bells and whistles. So if you're interested in either working on the Tech Help team or just going to one of the trainings so that you can learn more about how Zoom works again, please go ahead and contact me to get signed up for one of the trainings. For all those who have contacted me already, thank you so much. I just set up the training times yesterday. These times are not firm. I have to make sure all systems are go, but I will be reaching out to everyone who has contacted me. So I've already referred to the e-news once with the article on making Zoom work for you. The e-news should be in your email box. If you're not getting the e-news, that's because either you didn't give us your email address or there's some problem with getting emails through to you. So you can find out what the problem might be if you first make sure you've provided your email address to WILPF US. And if you have, then you can email info@wilpfus.org to get a call back from Chris Wilbeck, our remarkable administrative aide. She will walk you through all the things that go wrong that prevent people from getting the e-news. Once you get the e-news, you will know what's going on in WILPF, and you will know a lot more than many of your friends about current events in the world today. The latest issue had information on Cuba, on Yemen. I hope that all of you have heard about the Golden Rule, the anti-nuclear sailboat that brings its mission of peace to different parts of the world. We have a lot of great work going on with the Poor People's Campaign and Disarm, and as Nancy was saying, Earth Democracy, to demand that Biden have some backbone to support the things he said he'd support, and moreover to support racial justice, oppose nuclear arms spending, and follow through on the infrastructure bill he proposed that makes caregiving part of infrastructure. So I also provided a link for how to find the e-news if you didn't get it. Our e-newses are in the e-news archives on our website. So if for any reason you don't get them, you can always find them there. You can access the e-news archives by going to the bottom of our homepage under resources in a sort of putty or pink colored area, depending on your computer's color rendition. You will find under resources the e-news archives. Finally, I want to remind people that there are lots of ways to step up to leadership in WILPF US. You can develop leadership skills. You can actually accomplish more of what you want accomplished in WILPF US by making it happen, or at least facilitating it. There are quite a range of committees that are open to WILPF members. Some of them have some prerequisites, others do not. There are issue committees, administrative action committees, which is to say the board standing committees, and a complete long list of different ad hoc committees. I am especially encouraging people to contact me about the social media committee. I would hope that every branch in the US would have at least one member who is active on our national social media committee so that we can better coordinate the WILPF presence on social media and better understand social media, which is a bit of a challenge for some of us who are older and didn't grow up as electronic natives. So please contact me if you're interested in learning more about any of the national committees. And also, we are going to have WILPF elections coming up this fall, and now is the time to start informing yourself about the positions that are open. My time is up, so please contact me for further information. That's president@wilpfus.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Darian, for all you do. What an amazing amount of work and leadership. Now I see that Joan Goddard is here, and she has an announcement about the evolving, reconstituted Advancing Human Rights Committee. Joan?
Hello, everybody. Yes, in the Google Doc text pad, it has the name of the committee, and that we're going to have some updates, and also my name and San Jose, California, and my personal email address. However, if you're not there, or if you just want to be a much easier way to remember, just remember that the address for the Advancing Human Rights Committee is AHR, the first letters of Advancing Human Rights, chair, as in chairperson, at wilpfus.org. And those messages at this time are coming to me. In the future, they'll go to the new chair of the committee probably in October or maybe before, who knows. The main things I wanted to say are that we've set up a series of end of the month, essentially, not the last day, but late in the month meetings. We had one on June 30th, and the next one will be on July 29th, which is a Thursday. And then also the end of August, the 30th, and the end of September, the 29th. So I will be glad to give you that information if you write to me at ahrchair@wilpfus.org. I've been trying to put things into the, to add my own comments, but so far other people are able to do that, but I'm not. So I've tried several times, and Cheryl's been trying to help me with it, but it's not happening. So these are what I want to do is to give you the subject areas that we knew people were interested in already for the Advancing Human Rights Committee revival. And then we also have at the end of this list of 5 subject areas, other topics and concerns of people who want to get involved in the Advancing Human Rights Committee. And the idea will be that once people get the information, which I'm getting in the process of sending out now, about the other people who are interested in these subject areas, then you'll be able to set up your own meetings where you'll have longer than just a breakout room for half an hour or whatever at those monthly meetings that I mentioned. And some people, of course, many people are interested in more than one of these subjects and or other topics. So that will also be possible then to set up more subcommittees and to have a chance during the monthly meetings to get together in breakout rooms, and maybe a second short breakout room just to touch base. So the subject areas we're working on so far are United Nations efforts regarding women, immigration and border militarization, the UN International Decade for People of African Descent, anti-racism work in and by the WILPF, including book groups and resources list, as Darian was talking about, and coming up with other good ideas and sharing them and developing them. And the last topic that we actually are, that's kind of a multiple, or 2 topics in a way, but they're related, that we already have people working on, are that subject area is mass incarceration, prisons, and police militarization, which we all know needs to be decreased, of course. So those are the subject areas. And as I said, the next general meeting is July 29th. We'll have an e-alert as we did in late in June. We'll have one a week or so before the July 29th general AHR meeting. You please write to me at ahrchair@wilpfus.org so that I can get you in touch and let me know what, now somebody has put the information into the Google Doc. So the, what we would like to do is to get people who are interested in any of these topics or suggesting some other topic together with others so that you can meet in addition to the monthly meetings and get started working on these subject areas. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to see what I can do to answer, or you can write to me at ahrchair@wilpfus.org. But if you ask your question now, then other people can hear whatever we have to say about it. And there's information in the chat that I was going to put in, but thank you very much for entering it. Now I don't need to. Does anybody have any questions or comments or suggestions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, I think people can contact you and get involved. It's very exciting that you put so much work into revitalizing the advancing human rights. I mean, when you list the issues that you're going to try to cover, it's like a whole lot of major issues. So
right.
Thank you, and I hope that we can get some energy going on some of those. So thank you very much, Joan.
I know we can. We just
There
want
we go.
Everybody who wants to help.
There you go.
I have
All
a
right, thank you.
question. I have a question, Joan. So are you setting up a listserv at Electric Embers?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We will do that. They will do that. Yes, but we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our planned meeting. Please save the chat for your files before you leave the meeting, and it will also be available on our One WILPF Call webpage. As you should see now on our screen, our next One WILPF Zoom will be in September. Yes, there it is. That's right. We're skipping August because we'll all be too busy with our Congress Zooming. So look for us again on Thursday, September 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific time and 7 p.m. Eastern time. And following this, now we will have a short soapbox for anyone who's interested. So if you want to continue the dialogue, you can join us for a little bit after the meeting. But right now, if everyone can unmute yourselves, and we can say good night to each other. So thank you all for coming, and good night.
Good night, ladies. Good
night, ladies. Good night, ladies.
Good night.
Good night.
We'll have to learn to sing serially because you can't sing